The air in the mess hall at Naval Station Great Lakes was thick with the scent of lukewarm Salisbury steak and the low boisterous hum of 1,000 young men trying to be tougher than they were. For many, this was the crucible, the place where civilian boys were hammered into sailors. For 4 of them in particular, O'Connor, Ramirez, Jones, and Miller, it was a stage. They were a tight-knit quartet, fresh from their first week of boot camp, swaggering with the false confidence that came from having passed a few basic drills and being in a group. They'd aced the push-ups, run the laps, and now they felt they were the baddest men in the mess hall. Their target was an easy one. At least, she seemed easy. A lone woman, barely 5'3", sitting quietly at a table in a corner, nursing a cup of coffee. She was in a simple grey PT sweatshirt and shorts, her hair pulled back in a severe, no-nonsense bun. While the mess hall buzzed with shouts and laughter, she was an island of stillness. She didn't have the broad shoulders of the female recruits who had been in the program for months, nor the confident stride of the officers. She just sat there, small and unassuming. "Hey, check it out," O'Connor muttered, nudging Ramirez. O'Connor was the ringleader, all sharp angles and sharper attitude. With a haircut so fresh, it still looked like a mistake. "Looks like on a lost little rabbit." Ramirez, the bulky one with a bull neck and a perpetual smirk, grinned. "She's probably lost her platoon. Should we help her, O'Connor? She looks like she's about to cry." Jones, the lanky, silent type, and Miller, who was always trying too hard to keep up, snickered. They pushed their trays away and began their approach, moving in a loose semicircle to box her in. This was a classic hazing ritual, a way to test their dominance and entertain themselves in the soul-crushing routine of training. They felt untouchable. As they neared the table, the low hum of the mess hall seemed to drop a few decibels. Other recruits noticed, a few curious, most just anticipating a spectacle. "Hey there, Mom," O'Connor said, leaning forward and placing his hands on the table, his voice dripping with condescension. "You look a little out of place. Is there something we can help you with?" The woman, whose name was Petty Officer First Class Evelyn A.V. Reed, slowly looked up from her coffee cup. Her eyes, a startling shade of pale blue, were as calm as a winter sky. They held no fear, no surprise, nothing but a quiet, almost unsettling focus. "I'm fine," she said, her voice soft but clear, like the chime of a bell. "Don't be shy," Ramirez chimed in, stepping closer. "We're just here to make sure you're not, too far from home. A place like this, it's not for everybody." Evie took a slow sip of her coffee, her gaze moving from Ramirez to O'Connor and back again. "I think I'll be okay," she said, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. "Well, you know what they say," Miller blurted out, trying to contribute to the intimidation. "If you can't handle the mess hall, you can't handle the fleet." Evie placed her coffee cup back on the table with a precise, almost silent motion. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice dropping a register, the smile gone, "I suggest you move on." O'Connor scoffed. "Or what? What are you gonna do, little lady? You gonna call your daddy?" He laughed, a short, sharp bark. "Look, we're just having a little fun. You should try it sometime. Loosen up a little. Maybe you'll look less out of place." The silence that followed was heavy. Evie slowly rose from her seat, her small frame seeming to grow, to fill the space. The casual air of the 4 recruits evaporated, replaced by a flicker of unease. "You've got 45 seconds to get out of my sight," she said, and this time there was no mistaking the steel in her voice. "Or you'll find out exactly how out of place I am. The men exchanged glances. O'Connor's smirk returned, even wider now. A single woman giving an ultimatum to 4 men in a military mess hall was too ludicrous to be threatening. "Seconds," he said, shaking his head. "Is that all you can spare? I'd say we're going to be here for a while, little bird." Clock on the far wall ticked loudly. The seconds began to bleed away. O'Connor took another step forward, closing the circle. Ramirez mirrored him. Jones and Miller stood firm, their bravado cemented by their numbers. This was it, the moment of truth. Then the world tilted. It began with a blur of motion. Evie moved with a speed that defied her unassuming stature. Her arm shot out, and she grabbed O'Connor's extended wrist. It wasn't a grab, so much as a lock, a single fluid motion that twisted his arm in a way that should have been impossible. O'Connor cried out, the smirk instantly replaced by a look of pure, unadulterated pain. His body was yanked forward, his face hitting the table with a sickening thud. The tray of someone else's food rattled, and a cup of water spilled across the table. Ramirez lunged forward, his big fists swinging. Evie sidestepped his clumsy attack, her body a whisper of movement. She ducked under his wild swing, and in one motion, came up with her elbow driving into his solar plexus. The air rushed out of Ramirez's lungs with a wheeze, and he folded, his face turning a sickly shade of grey. Jones, the lanky one, was a fraction of a second too slow. He hadn't even started to move when Evie's foot swept out, an impossibly fast kick that caught him just above the ankle. He lost his footing and went down hard, his head bouncing off the linoleum floor. The man who had been so quiet was now completely silenced. Miller, the last of the 4, stood frozen in place, a deer in the headlights. His face was a mask of terror. The entire confrontation had taken less than 10 seconds. O'Connor was on him, the floor, groaning, his arm twisted at an unnatural angle. Ramirez was gasping for air, clutching his stomach. Jones was out cold. Miller looked at Evie, a small woman whose chest was not even heaving, and knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that he was next. She took a step toward him, and he instinctively put his hands up, a pathetic gesture of surrender. I'm sorry," he stammered, his voice cracking. I didn't know." "You've got 15 seconds left," she said calmly, a ghost of her previous smile returning. "I suggest you start running. Now." Miller didn't hesitate. He turned and sprinted out of the mess hall like a shot, not daring to look back. The entire incident, from the moment she gave the ultimatum to the last recruit running away, had taken exactly 42 seconds. A senior chief petty officer, a man with a stern face and a reputation to match, walked up to the table, his eyes sweeping over the scene. His name was Chief Carter, and he had seen a lot of things in his career, but this was new. He looked at the chaos, the overturned chair, the spilled food, the 3 groaning, defeated men, and then his gaze settled on Evie. He looked at her small frame, the unassuming clothes, the placid expression. He knew this woman. He knew her better than any of these young men would ever know. "Evelyn," he said, his voice quiet but commanding. "I thought you were supposed to be having an easy day." "I was," she said, her voice low. "But it seems I was mistaken. These gentlemen decided to help me with my day." Chief Carter sighed, a long weary sound. He bent down to help O'Connor sit up. "What did you boys think you were doing?" he said, his tone one of quiet disappointment. "Thought you could mess with one of ours?" "Ours, Chief," O'Connor said, wincing as he clutched his arm. She's a girl. What did you think she was gonna do?" Chief Carter looked at him, his expression one of pity. "Son," he said, shaking his head, "you just got taken out by a decorated Navy SEAL. Petty Officer Reed here is a member of DevGru. You just crossed paths with a woman who has more confirmed kills than your entire platoon has hours in service. You boys are lucky you're only hurt." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. The surrounding recruits, who had been watching in stunned silence, now looked on with a kind of terrified awe. A Navy SEAL, a member of Naval Special Warfare Development Group, a woman who had served in the most elite and secretive of combat units. And she was here, in their mess hall, drinking coffee. O'Connor, Ramirez, and Jones all looked at her again, their faces a mixture of confusion, humiliation, and dawning terror. The little tourist, the lost rabbit, the girl who couldn't handle the mess hall. They had seen a ghost. They had tried to haze a phantom, a woman who had a small, inconspicuous scar on her left temple, the result of a near miss with a sniper round in a dusty alley in Mosul, a woman who could hold her breath for over 5 minutes, a skill honed by hours of underwater training, a woman who had been a key part of an operation that took down a high-value target in the mountains of Afghanistan. They had seen none of this. They had only seen what they expected to see. Avi looked down at the three of them, and for the first time, her expression softened. "Don't feel bad," she said, her voice now completely devoid of threat. "It's a common mistake." She leaned down and helped Ramirez to his feet, her touch as gentle as a nurse's. "You'll learn. This place isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about being the smartest, about being observant. You saw a small woman, so you made a judgment call. That's the first thing you have to unlearn in the Navy. Never underestimate your opponent. Never." Chief Carter nodded, his expression softening as he watched her. "You know why Petty Officer Reed is here, boys," he said, his voice low and serious. "She's here to teach. She's part of a new program to train our recruits in close quarters combat. She's one of the best in the world, and you three just got a free lesson." He looked at Evie. "What's the verdict, Evelyn? Did they learn their lesson?" Evie smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed her face. "I think they did, Chief. I think they'll remember this mess hall for the rest of their lives." The 3 men were taken to the infirmary to be checked out. O'Connor's arm was dislocated, and Ramirez had 2 bruised ribs. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the psychological wound they had suffered. The memory of the 45-second blur would haunt them, a constant reminder of their arrogance. They had learned more in that brief moment than they had in their entire week of boot camp. The lesson was simple, and it was hard-won. In the military, you learn to judge a person, not by what they look like, but by what they are capable of. Over the next few weeks, Evie became a legend in the mess hall. The other recruits had seen what happened, and the story grew with each retelling. She was no longer the small, unassuming woman. She was a ghost, a whisper, a force of nature. When she walked through the mess hall, the buzz of conversation would stop, and a respectful silence would follow. She would sit at her corner table, drink her coffee, and observe. Her eyes, as calm and cold as a winter sky, would scan the room, and the young men would feel a respectful shiver. They learned to be quiet, they learned to be observant, and they learned, above all else, to never underestimate the quiet ones. The 4 recruits who had surrounded her that day went on to become better sailors. They never forgot the 45 seconds that changed their lives. They saw her in the training yard one day, instructing a class of new recruits. Her voice sharp and authoritative, her movements as fluid as water. She taught them to fight, to think, and to survive. And they, The boys who had learned the hard way became her most dedicated students. They had walked into the mess hall expecting to find a lost rabbit. They had found a predator. They had laughed at her, and she had shown them that she was far more dangerous than any of them could have ever imagined. They had learned the most important lesson of their young careers, and they would carry it with them for the rest of their lives. The most dangerous person in the room is often the one you least suspect, the quiet one, the one who doesn't need to prove anything because they already have. They had tied her up with their assumptions and their condescension, and in 45 seconds she had untied herself, and in doing so, had set them free from their own ignorance.